Welcome back here with your Birds 365. We get to add another JM to the mix. Our buddy Jon Machota from down there in Big D to talk Cowboys offseason. Mr. Machota, how has your offseason been?
Pretty similar to most in the past. I can't really complain. There's been some changes down here, but nothing that I think significantly changes. I think the Cowboys are on a pretty similar path as they've been the last couple of years.
I guess we'll start with the biggest change, at least off the field. That's Mike McCarthy taking back the play calling. No more Kellen Moore, Brian Schottenheimer, the offensive coordinator. How's that being taken outside of Dallas? A lot of people. I like Mike McCarthy as a coach more than most people. He's had a lot of success, but for whatever reason, didn't win enough with Aaron Rodgers, didn't win the big one. I don't know. There's a lot of I'm sure you hear it all the time, John. There's a lot of shots taken at Mike. Where are you and him as the play caller?
I think it's fine. I don't think it's some move that all of a sudden you're like, well, that'll put them over the top. Super Bowls, NFC Championship game, here they go. Like, they needed probably to change some things up a little bit. But I would say when it comes to perception with coordinators, especially offensive play callers, it seems like the only thing that ever excites anyone is if it's this new, young, up-and-coming that nobody knows anything about. Anybody that's already done stuff in the league, it's like, that's boring, that's old, we don't care about that. Yeah. And then, of course, there's the fact of Mike McCarthy doesn't get enough credit for the success that they had in Green Bay, because he left, and I didn't see him winning any Super Bowls after he left. So I think that he was a really good coach in Green Bay, and because those were Aaron Rodgers' best years, he doesn't get any credit for that. Now, of course, he's not gonna be able to do the exact same things he did with Rodgers, but the guy obviously knows how to call an offense, and so he's in a position where his job's on the line. They have to go deep into the playoffs, and so I think all along from the moment he took this job, unless things were just great with Kellen Moore, which they weren't bad, but something needed to change. And obviously the quarterback wasn't going to change. The defense has been its strength. They're not going to change anything there. So what's the next thing that could possibly change? And so this is why they're going in this direction. Do I guarantee you that it's going to have great success? I can't guarantee that, but I don't think it's going to be tremendously different to where all of a sudden it was like, wow, that was a big mistake. Now all of a sudden they're going to drop off. I think they're going to be pretty similar to what they've been the last couple of years, because at the end of the day, it's a National Football League. You can have all the coaches, give me the best players.
That's very true. But one more question on that relationship, because relationships are important between the quarterback and the offensive coordinator. How was the relationship between Moore and Dak? How will the relationship between Dak and his head coach / offensive coordinator, which kind of changes the dynamic of the relationship, how would you compare the two?
Yeah, he was close with Kellen Moore. Certainly Kellen Moore is not here or did not leave Dallas because Dak didn't want him here. That's not the case at all. Dak loved working with Kellen. They had been teammates together when Dak came into the league. And then Kellen became quarterback coach and then offensive coordinator. And I thought that they, saw things eye to eye offensively. And so it is going to be a change for Dak, but Dak's also a person that needs to take that next step in his career too. So that's why I also look at this as a veteran play caller. He's worked with a future Hall of Fame quarterback and other quarterbacks that are of that level as well before in his career. So why not? Why couldn't this be the guy that does it for him? So it'll be interesting. But when you say the word perception, though, one of the first things I think about is how, during the previous 3 years, when you're the head coach, obviously you're going to take shots when the team doesn't succeed. But now, after every single game, if the offense struggles, immediately that goes to Mike. Whereas in previous years, if the offense struggled, you'd look towards Kellen Moore and, and more blame goes on your coordinator. Well, if the offense struggles at all any week, that's going to be more blame on Mike McCarthy. And so obviously a lot more on his plate. And obviously expectations have to be much higher than what they've been, what they've reached the last couple of years.
Now, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, John, because I don't know if the door is completely shut. There's been some lip service, but I don't think it's real. Ezekiel Elliott is gone. He's still out there, though, technically. So in theory, they could bring him back. But how does that shift the offense? And stylistically, still a good player, but obviously a descending player. And now they have to go a little bit in a different direction with Tony Pollard being the lead back and doing some things probably in a less power-based way, I would say it. Is that going to change things dramatically for the Cowboys?
I don't know if it's dramatically, but it definitely changes things because the Cowboys haven't really replaced Ezekiel Elliott. They went out and signed Ronald Jones. They drafted Deuce Vaughn in the 6th round. Those aren't really Ezekiel Elliott replacements. The one thing that's really missing on this offense is an Ezekiel Elliott type back. Who's going to be that guy, when they play the Eagles and it's 3rd and 1, 4th and 1 late in the game? And for all the criticism that you could have had of Zeke, a lot of it comes because of what his contract ended up being. Zeke was still very good, goal line, short yardage situations. You gave him the ball, he was going to get you that yard most of the time. And now they don't really have that guy. Tony Pollard is great in space, and Deuce Vaughn, I think, is a player that can be great in space. But who's that guy that puts their head down and you're just like, man, that you're going to get that yard, and when you don't get that yard, you're surprised. And so it's kind of interesting that if Ezekiel Elliott had been with a different team that had released him, I think the Cowboys would be super interested. But because of the way things ended, it's like, well, we're not going to bring him back in here. So now you're sitting there thinking, like, I don't think they're completely set at running back. I'm interested to see what they do there. Maybe that it ends up being one of those things where they go get like a Leonard Fournette or somebody like that. But I just do not see Ezekiel Elliott coming back. I think he'll get an offer from someone else. And obviously he ain't going to be anywhere close to the money he was making before. But I look at this roster and I don't see a replacement. I don't see that 6'1", 220 guy that you're going to hand the ball to on 3rd and 1 situations right now.
What is Brandin Cooks' role going to be for the Dallas Cowboys this year? Major offseason acquisition. He's put up numbers, but he's become one of the more transient guys in the National Football League, going from team to team to team to team. Why is it going to work in Dallas?
Well, he's in a spot now where, I mean, his role is pretty clear. He's got to take the top off the defense. They've been missing that speed on the outside. And so a veteran guy like him who, I mean, he's been around Drew Brees, been around Tom Brady, been to, Super Bowls, he has the skins on the wall that you would think he should come in immediately and be a capable guy of getting 1,000 yards. And the Cowboys had that a few years ago when they had Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup was healthy, with CeeDee Lamb. And then last year they trade Amari Cooper, don't get much for him in return. Michael Gallup was not fully recovered from the knee injury he had the year before. Their 3rd round pick, Jalen Tolbert, gave them nothing. So there was some issues at wide receiver. It had to be addressed this offseason. It was kind of surprising they made the move for Cooks because it just isn't typically a Cowboys move during the free agency portion of the year. I thought they would address it early in the draft, but they wanted a proven guy. To now, Cooks is probably your 2/3 with Gallup if Gallup's all the way back. And now you're kind of back to where you have 3 formidable guys on the outside. But it is interesting, you mentioned it, as good as he's been for all these different teams, it is to be traded as many times as he has. And he's not like he's a cancer in the locker room type guy or anything like that. It has been
so weird.
Because he's had success.
He's been so successful. He's traded so much. He's not a bad guy. It is one of the weirdest things, John. Their other kind of splashy free agent acquisition type move was more interesting to me. That's on the defensive side of the ball with Stephon Gilmore. Now he's 32, but he can still play. And the Cowboys had a lot of issues when they had some injuries opposite Trayvon Diggs. Now all of a sudden you have Diggs and Gilmore. That's pretty good. I like that on paper.
Yeah, as long as Gilmore can stay healthy, they'll be fine there at corner and be much improved than they were last year. Because you're right, during the last 4 or 5 games of the regular season and going into the playoffs, that other outside corner spot was far, far from a strength after Anthony Brown went down. And so they made a conscious effort to address that this offseason, and those deals happened. The same thing as Cooks right around the same time. It was very clear that those were 2 of their biggest holes, and they were going to fill them with proven players. They weren't going to be leaving it open to some competition out in training camp. And so if Gilmore can stay healthy, that was the big thing, is that he wasn't fully healthy 2 years ago. And then he went to the Colts, and from talking to him a week ago, that's when he really started to get back. And he says right now he's healthier than he's been in the last 2 or 3 years. And now he's in a spot where he doesn't have to be their number one. He just has to be formidable on that other side because, obviously Trayvon Diggs gets a lot of attention and everyone knows who he is in the league and his ability to take the ball away. And so it's interesting on paper because the Cowboys just continue to get stronger on defense to the point where this could be the best defense in the league. It's certainly going to be in the conversation again as one of the best. And this is an organization that for a long time down here, it's been very offense first. And now I think it's officially changed. This is a defensive first team.
All right. We've kind of sung the Cowboys' praises of a couple of acquisitions during the offseason free agency. Yeah, we got to bring it back down a little bit. Luke Schoonmaker, how many tight ends went before him in the second round? The Cowboys decided to sit and wait rather than aggressively go up. You never know who's going to come off the board, but I know as soon as the pick went in, they said this was the guy we were targeting all along. I'm going to throw the BS flag on that one. Give us the backstory as to how Luke Schoonmaker ended up as their second-round tight end choice in the draft.
Well, it's very clear that Mike McCarthy likes the Big Ten. And all of their tight ends are Big Ten tight ends right now. They have Peyton Hendershot was from Indiana, Luke Schoonmaker, Sean McCune, both from Michigan, and then Jake Ferguson is a Wisconsin guy. He likes the way that it translates from what they did in college to the pros. It's very similar. They're tight ends in the Big Ten, most of those schools. Iowa is obviously another one where it usually translates pretty well to what is asked of them immediately in the NFL. So that's why they like Schoonmaker. He was certainly not their top player on their board or anything like that. They can say whatever they want, but it's the player of need that they wanted. And if they had waited to the third round, then all of a sudden, then you're really wiped out of the position as deep as it was in this draft class. The one thing I'll say, though, is it's just so hard to predict at tight end. You just go through the last 10 years of tight end in the first round. The hits are just it's pathetic. It's unbelievable how few hits there are in the first round when you take a tight end. And then you get all these guys that have had success at tight end and they are second, third round picks that you're just like, how is Travis Kelce not a top 10 pick? Guys like that. So that's one of the Mark Andrews,
Dallas Goedert here.
Yeah.
Rounder.
Eagles tried to get up ahead of the Cowboys to get Dallas Goedert.
It's a position that just, I don't know. Obviously, when they take Luke Schoonmaker, it's not revving up the fan base to, this is the missing piece. So they lose Dalton Schultz. That's how they're going to replace him. It's going to be interesting to see because from day one, I don't think he's going to step in and be what Dalton Schultz was when he left. So there's going to be some growing pains probably at that position for sure.
The first round pick, Mazi Smith. Now, I've been through this here and still yesterday, Jon Machota. I got a fan because Sean Desai is going to speak for the first time today, even though he's hired 6 months ago. But anyway, Eagles fans are obsessed with Jordan Davis turning into a 3-down player. Why? Because he was taken number 13 overall. He's not a 3-down player. He's a 2-down player. He's a run stuffer. But for whatever reason, people do not see the value in that type of player. It's not quite as bad, Dallas, with Mazi Smith at 26. But is there going to be an issue? Because he's a physical freak. He was on Bruce Feldman's list. He's got all this athleticism, but he's a 2-down player. Jordan Davis is a physical freak, but he's a 2-down player. Can NFL fans accept a first-round pick that's a 2-down player?
The only difference here I'll say is that, I'm just going to use the last decade as an example. The Eagles have had very good defensive tackle play, so I feel like Eagles fans can be a little bit pickier. The Cowboys defensive tackle play. This is the first defensive tackle taken in the first round since 1991 when they took Russell Maryland. The Cowboys just have not addressed defensive tackle enough. Mazi Smith's probably got the chance to be one of their most impactful defensive tackles in a long time. Maybe going back to Jay Ratliff. It has not been a position of strength. Under Rod Marinelli, it was always they were trying to find the next 3 technique that, really stood out. And they just never really got it. And so with Mazi Smith, I agree with you. He is more of your one technique run stopper. But if you look at the Cowboys defense under Dan Quinn, they've been strong in almost every category except for run defense. And it needed to be addressed. And I just look at it as this: if you don't do it there, when do you do it?
By the way, John, I think it's a great bit, especially when you have the pass rushers the Cowboys have. I think it's a great bit because he can do the dirty work, and all of a sudden Mike can go get the quarterback even more, DeMarcus Lawrence. I think it's a great bit, but if he doesn't put up 7 sacks and he's a first-round pick, people are like, what is it? And you don't get a lot of tackles because you're taking up blockers. The linebackers are getting the tackles. It could be a great pick, and nobody knows it. That's kind of what I think you're in for.
He might not even get the sacks, and it just might improve the run defense to where it could be top 10, and that would be worth it. But to your point, sacks are such a big deal with fans too. And you see a guy, they draft Mazi Smith. What's going to be the first thing you do? You go look at what he did in college, and obviously he was an outstanding player, one of the best players on this Michigan team the last 2 years. That it's been the best football Michigan's played in 2 decades.
Yeah.
And he's been a key part of that, but he has a half sack. Yeah. He has a half sack in his, so that's going to be the part that fans aren't going to love. But I just look at it from this standpoint. If it wasn't going to be Mazi Smith there, it was going to be Matthew Bergeron, an offensive guard from Syracuse. How much does that really excite the fan base either? So it was like whatever they were going to pick there, it was not going to be one where the fans are running to the pro shop getting a jersey. But I'm interested to see the Mazi Smith thing just because the run defense was constantly the thing where you're like, man, they do so many things well on defense, but how is that run defense still not even middle of the pack? And so this move should put them at least there.
All right, this will tell you that something I said previously on the show is stone cold true. Emmitt Smith was number 22. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes.
I'm terrible. I'm terrible with numbers. I was a kid, and Emmitt wasn't when I was a kid, but I was a Cowboy fan when Emmitt Smith was there. I had forgotten what number he was. 22, right? I did remember.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So does Mazi Smith ask for 22? So that way you can confuse people with Smith 22 jerseys down there in Dallas.
No, it's funny that you say that because he's going to take 58, which is what he wore in college. So it was an easy transition. But not too long ago, the Cowboys had Aldon Smith and he wore 58. So, just one Smith to the other. But yeah,
Smith
now
50. I had the wrong Smith. I skipped over Aldon. Aldon, you have my apologies. I went back to Emmitt. I should have remembered Aldon. Right,
but the team right now has Mazi Smith, Tyler Smith, Tyron Smith. So yeah, whatever.
Yeah, a lot of
Smiths. Well, that's where I'm going. Over to the offensive line next. Assuming health with everyone, and that was a big assumption for the Cowboys last year because they're plugging and playing and moving guys around and getting our guy, RFX left tackle out there to play a little football at age, was 40 this year, John?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was 40, yeah.
Yeah.
41 this year, yeah.
Assuming that everyone is healthy, what is the Dallas offensive line going to look like left to right, starters and depth?
Yeah, so left guard is a big question mark here. When Connor McGovern, they weren't going to pay him a ton, so he moved on, signed with Buffalo. So left guard is completely wide open. They added Chuma Edoga, who is not really a left guard. He's played more offensive tackle in his career, but they look at him as a guard from the New York Jets. They signed him. So he is probably the leader in the clubhouse right now because for some reason they are reluctant to put Tyler Smith back at left guard.
Really?
They want their first round pick to be that left tackle. What I think might happen, though, is their hand might be forced, and they might, because they want to get their best 5 out there. And if that happens, then you got to put Tyler Smith back at left guard, Tyron Smith at left tackle. But as they say right now, they really wanted to try and get Tyler Smith to stay at left tackle, and then at right tackle, start Tyron Smith over there where he ended last season, and have Terrence Steele be the swing tackle. And they're not going to say this, but the thinking behind that is because Tyron Smith just can't stay healthy. And so why pencil him into this starting spot to think that you're going to get, you might only get 3 games from him, 5 games from him. So I think that that's their plan right there. As of right now, they would love for somebody else to come along, win that left guard job, whether it's Edoga. They signed TJ Bass out of Oregon right after the draft, who, our guy at The Athletic, Dane Brugler, had a 5th, 6th round grade. He was certainly a draftable player. Dane had him as one of the top 5 guards in the draft, and he was one of their top undrafted guys that they signed. I think he'll get in the mix. They drafted Awesome Richards. He's an offensive tackle out of North Carolina in the 5th round. He'll get work there at left guard. And even Terrence Steele, their right tackle, might get some work there too. They're going to try and find someone else, but if week 1 they don't have a better option, I find it hard to believe that Tyler Smith's not going to be.
Man, I'm surprised by that, John.
Yeah.
Because I think that looks, if you have Smith and Smith on the left side, and I get with Tyron, you're worried about the injuries, but Yeah. So what? Tyler's already proven he can play left tackle. If he's got to move him there. Terrence Steele's turned into a pretty good right tackle. What, just wait for the injury and then just move
Right.
it. Yeah. I'm
Yeah, I
going to
just think that this
criticize Mike McCarthy for that.
No. Yeah, and deservedly so. I mean, I do think Tyler Smith's best position going forward for the future. He will be their left tackle, and so maybe it's one of these things where they just don't want to, consistently cross train him. It's kind of one of those things. Hey, because last year at training camp he was playing left guard, and then all of a sudden it was like, well, we're going to need him at left tackle, and they kind of just threw him to the wolves, and it worked out. And that's where he proved that, hey, I can handle this, and he is real sharp kid. I mean, he has all of the traits and everything about him makes you think that he's going to be a Dallas Cowboy for the next decade. But for some reason they do not want him. And that's why I said that Mike McCarthy, the coaching staff, they seriously considered Matthew Bergeron with that first round pick so that they would plug him at left guard.
Wow.
But then the rest of the offensive line is Tyler Biadasz again is their center. He made his first Pro Bowl last year.
Zach Martin
at right guard. And
one of the best players in football.
Yeah, so I mean, the other positions are pretty set, but that left guard is going to be one of those where it's going to be one of the biggest ones that we're monitoring throughout training camp, that's for sure.
All right, John, I had some fun with this question, asking it of guests on our show to put themselves into Jeff Lurie's shoes about how they would like to see the first game of the year scheduled at Kansas City, lay up against the Arizona Cardinals, however you go with it. I'm going to put you in Jerry Jones's shoes instead of Jeff Lurie's. Eagles and Cowboys going to play twice this year. If you consider it in 3 sections, early season matchup, middle of the season matchup, late in the season matchup. If you had to land the 2 games against the Eagles, if the commissioner gave you the latitude to say you can place them in 2 of the 2 games in any of the 3 positions, early, middle, late, what would be best for the Cowboys? The matchup between Philadelphia and Dallas, best from a Dallas perspective. Do you want to see the Eagles early and get it over and done with? Then in middle, you want to stay away from late? No, we want to get them late because we're going to get better as the season goes along. If you were in Jerry's shoes and the commissioner gave you latitude to schedule those 2 games, how would you break them out?
The Eagles playing in Philadelphia, that game as early in the season as possible. I mean, just because weather, and things like that can factor in.
Good point.
This is a team that, I mean, it's funny. Mike McCarthy calls them a dome team, just because they usually play in decent weather or they're playing inside at AT&T Stadium. And so because of that, because the Cowboys, they also have, that's going to be one of the biggest games monitoring on when the schedule gets released is when is the Buffalo game, because they play at Buffalo. Is it going to be late in the year? Could be,
Could be moving to Detroit.
Well, yeah, right. So I think he'd want to play early in the year at Philadelphia and probably late in the year at AT&T Stadium against the Eagles. And of course, I say that now because they're healthy. Who knows, what happens in training camp if there's some injuries that have some guys that obviously, you look at last year's. They would have obviously liked to have Dak for both games and not have to start Cooper Rush at Philadelphia, but injuries happen and things happen. So maybe it's not great to play them early in the season. I know that there's a lot of people that think that they should play other divisions games later in the year, and that's fine. But I think if Jerry had to pick, as long as he get that Philadelphia earlier in the season, I think he'd be fine with whatever week it was.
I mean, I get the NFL's theory with keeping division games late because you're less likely to not care when it's a division game, but it hasn't proven to be true. There's been so many late season Cowboys-Eagles game, John, that haven't meant anything for one of the 2 teams, and it ends up being nothing. And that's kind of disappointing, So for once, I'd like to get both games in the meat of the schedule, but it's not going to happen now. It's just not going to happen.
You're right. I mean, it's been that way for the Cowboys, whether they've closed this season against Philly or New York or Washington. They've just not really, they closed the season last year and laid one of the biggest eggs that I've seen them lay against Washington at Washington. I'm just like, what is this? It was like they didn't even show up for that game going right into the playoffs. It was a head scratcher. You thought that would be one of the best games that they play. And so, the schedule makers try and line it up like that because ultimately what's getting better ratings than Philadelphia, Dallas, and one of them has to win that game to make the playoffs or the division's on the line or something along the line. but it just hasn't worked out that way.
Right. As great as it could potentially be, I weigh that against the fact that several times over the last however many years, the game has been meaningless because one team was and didn't have to do anything. The other team desperately, no. Unless you can guarantee me they both are 100% in it to win the game. I don't want to see it go to waste. I don't want to see backups playing. I don't want to see the secondary, the JV team out there for either of these two teams. Certainly, we're doing an Eagle perspective show, but either I don't like to see the JV play. So sorry, you're not saving it till the last week of the season, Commissioner. If I'm in your ear, I'm telling you that can't happen. But one thing we do know is it's been decades since there's been a repeat champion in the NFC East. You got to go back to the Andy Reid Eagles last time it happened. And yeah, the Cowboys a couple of times defending champ. Oops, they didn't win it the year thereafter. It is the Eagles as the defending champion. Does Mike McCarthy mention that at all at any time preseason, right before an Eagles game this year, that we got to wrest this thing back? You can't let the Eagles do it again. They were the last to do it. We're going to let them do it again. It's supposed to be our division. Does McCarthy play that card with his players at all this year?
He might. I don't think he has to, though, just because of the fact that this rivalry is just, it's in such a good spot right now between the two teams. There's just that genuine dislike, I feel. And both teams know that the other one is their biggest, competition. I understand the Giants made the playoffs last year, but you kind of want to see them do that again. Whereas I just really feel like this whole Cowboys-Eagles thing, it really kind of sucked that last year you didn't get to see, Jalen Hurts play against Dak and Dak play against Hurts, and you never got to see them both at full strength. So, if that happens this year, wherever the game's at, I just don't think that you're going to need the extra motivation. I think that both teams look at it as, hey, this division is going to come down to the two of us. And then the other thing is just, I don't know how the Cowboys would need any extra motivation. It's very clear that the Eagles are the favorite right now. They are the hunted, and you shouldn't need any extra motivation for that game. What's on the line for that one. So I'm looking forward to it just because of the fact that there is that genuine rivalry that it's really been missing really in the NFC East for a while there. And it seems like it's fully back because however you want to break it down, I just think that it's clear that, the Cowboys, Eagles, Niners have kind of separated themselves in the NFC. I know like there's the, Lions and some other teams that are coming, but I just really think that those three teams are kind of the class of the NFC. And when two of them are in the same division, I just don't think you need any extra motivation there.
At Jon Machota, follow John on Twitter. Don't hold it against him. Does a tremendous job covering the Dallas Cowboys for The Athletic. About Them Cowboys, his podcast. Also listen to that. John, my last one kind of involves what you're saying. The Eagles are the favorite. Earlier this week, Peter King didn't do him any favors. He was doing his offseason power rankings, and he said, too early, but put 7 categories together. Number 1 alone with the Philadelphia Eagles was the Philadelphia Eagles. Can't find a weakness. I can find a weakness. We can all find a weakness. For the Dallas Cowboys, who I think were in that second tier, which is Super Bowl vibes or something like that. Biggest weakness on the Dallas Cowboys from your perspective?
As we sit here today, this isn't my answer, but as we sit here today, they technically don't have a kicker on the roster, so you probably need to address that.
All right, let's cross kicker off because let's cross special teams off.
Yeah, we'll say they'll get like a Robbie Gould or something like that, and they'll be at least okay there. I do have some concerns about that offensive line just because Zach Martin's getting older, Tyron Smith's getting older. You don't really know what you have at left guard. And it's been a position group that, when you were able to stay pretty healthy out of those 5, you usually have a decent amount of success. And since Mike McCarthy's been the head coach, they have just not been able to have that same 5 out there. So I just feel like if you can get that taken care of and you can show up and have a good offensive line, the trickle down from that, I think, will just be incredible. I think the running game will look a lot better. Dak will have a lot more time to get the ball out to Cooks and Lamb and Gallup. And so I think that is the huge question mark for right now is just what are they going to get out of offensive line? New offensive line coach, Mike Solari. There's a lot of moving pieces there that if it isn't, good and they do struggle there, I just think the trickle down of how bad that could be for the rest of the team could be a really bad thing. And I also want to add, John, at least you're getting your new coordinator. We still haven't talked to Brian Schottenheimer yet.
Oh, all right.
Oh,
So,
okay.
it's
Yeah,
rare.
you'll get your chance coming up in the next couple of days. Well, maybe weeks. I don't know. I could be talking out my ear hole. Last thing, and we'll lighten it up a little bit here. As a sports talk show host here in Philadelphia, national, everything else, I think it's funny in Philadelphia in that Philadelphia fans love when Rasheed Wallace wears a Flyers jersey at another venue. But God forbid Devontae Smith give a hug to Jason Tatum, who apparently he's friends with when the Celtics and the Sixers are playing. Very hypocritical here in town. You're supposed to be a diehard. So you get drafted by a Philadelphia team, you got to become a 4-for-4 guy and root for all 4 Philly teams. But you former Philly guys who grew up in Philadelphia, you can continue to root for the Philly team. You don't have to join your new team, new town that you're in. It just drives me crazy and continue to do so. Micah Parsons showing up in a Sixer outfit this week. How's that playing down in Dallas?
Not great. This is the thing. Micah Parsons is just such a good player. He's the Cowboys' probably most important player if it's not Dak. And, he just has been so dynamic the first 2 years he's been in the league that I think they'll allow him to pass on it. So they don't love it though. You tweet out the picture of him wearing that and it obviously doesn't go well for him just because of this hate for, Philadelphia. I will say though, I've always felt like the Philadelphia hate for the Dallas is stronger than what the Dallas. It's just weird because Philadelphia is like the fan base is like the city and like this is our city type thing. Whereas like the Cowboys fan base, of course it's in Dallas, but it's just like the Cowboys fans are just so spread out. That's why usually they travel really well because there's just so many that live so many different places. So basically what I'm getting is there's just so many Cowboys fans that, and you guys know this too, they're also Lakers fans and then Yankees fans. You know what I'm saying? So it's a little bit different there. The one thing being a native Metro Detroiter, though, I will say, though, about Rasheed Wallace, because I'll just never forget, his first press conference when he got traded to the Pistons, he was wearing like a Derek Thomas jersey with a Chiefs hat. And I'm like, I didn't know he was a Chiefs fan. So when they were playing the Eagles in Super Bowl, I'm like, there's no way he's going to be wearing that Chiefs stuff. And sure enough, he did. And I could not believe that he was doing that because I thought he was, complete Philly through and through. So I know that must not have played well in the city either.
Yeah, it's been it creates conversation for me on the phone, so I probably shouldn't complain, but there's a hypocritical nature to it. Jon Machota, we always appreciate it. Good luck getting your new OC for a press session sometimes in the next couple
now
of
I
weeks.
Can't complain as much. I didn't know that. I thought we were alone. They're hiding Sean Desai. I saw him out in the wild last week during rookie camp, but this will be our first time to speak to him. Yeah.
Johnny,
well,
much
Schottenheimer is offensive coordinator, title-wise, but whatever.
Yeah, and we know that the head coach will be calling the plays, which will give you plenty to sink your teeth into during the year. John, thanks so much for hopping on board. We're going to get you on as soon as the season rolls back around. Thanks for doing it with us today.
Anytime, guys. I always enjoy it.
Thanks,
Jon Machota from The Athletic. If you're not an Athletic subscriber, which I am, it's the only one that I'll actually go into pocket to pay for. He does a great job. The Athletic's pretty damn good website, too. All right, Johnny Mac, Jody Mac, Mac and Mac guys coming back